Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Miriam Manzo. We asked a few videos ago if anybody was interested in us doing a video solely on faux flowers. You all know how I have a passion for flowers, and the outstanding result of that was that yes, people were interested in it. So I thought today, you can see here I've got a bunch of vessels as well as a bunch of faux flowers, and I would talk to you a little bit about how I go about selecting, pairing and using faux flowers to get the most realistic look, and so that I can have the beauty of flowers in my home every day. So I know faux flowers aren't for everyone. They've had a bad rap over the years, and I can see why. Most people think of faux flowers as the type that you would get at the dollar store or the equivalent. But faux flowers really have come such a long way over the years. And there is now a product which is called the Real Feel Silks. And if you feel these, they are truly real feel. So I'm going to pull one of these tulips. So this is one of the tulips that stays on my counter every day. And it actually reacts as well as feels like a real closed tulip. So some of the tricks to knowing whether it's a good quality faux. That's the first one. The next one is whether or not there is wire in the stem so that you can bend it and manipulate it so that you really give it the feeling of being a real flower. And in the best quality, even the leaves will have some bend to them or flop. And you can see this one where it's actually veined the way a real leaf of a tulip would be, and has that same flop that a real tulip has. The other thing that I look for is the stem itself. While I want it to have wire and be able to bend, does the stem look realistic? So for example, if I pull this branch here, if this branch had a green plastic stem, you're going to know immediately that it's faux, because this type of a branch grows on a woody stem. So as you can see here, this has the look of actual wood. Now, one of the other tricks to getting a very realistic looking flower, I'm going to do it with this one, is this is how this bundle is sold. So if I were to put this into a vase, you're going to see that it is not realistic at all. So what I do is I actually take the time to bend each and every stem so that I manipulate it. Once I've put it into my vase, I do this usually, and you can see the minute I start opening all of these stems up and giving them some curve and some natural life to them, you can see the difference when you go from this to this. So not only are you going to need less stems when you're manipulating like this, but it is going to give you more of a realistic look. So that's in a branch. If I come over here and I pull a flower, same thing. You can see that's the way they're going to sell it in the store. So when I start one by one manipulating these branches, and I'm mimicking the way I think that it would grow in nature. And I'm also going to take a look at my vase itself and what that's asking for. So you can see the difference between, again, let me pull one over here, store-bought versus once you get home and you manipulate. So that's going to make a world of difference. Now, here's another tip. Buy your faux flowers in the season they grow. So I'm going to say that again. You're not going to go looking for a cherry blossom in the fall because you're not going to find them. You're going to look for a cherry blossom February, March, April. So the makers of faux flowers know, the buyers I should say, that you're not going to be thinking about cherry blossoms in the fall. You're going to be thinking about sunflowers. So that's what they're going to have on display, and that's what they're going to be pushing. So just keeping that in mind now, do not display your faux flowers in the season they don't grow. So, for example, we have these here, cherry blossoms. So right now, this is what's decorating my counter. So in this area of my kitchen, I always have flowers. I sometimes have real, I sometimes have just faux, but very often I'm mixing faux and real together. So right now, my cherry blossoms are on display. In October, you're not going to see cherry blossoms on my counter. You're going to see, again, sunflowers or another flower of the season, perhaps an astilbe or definitely a hydrangea at that point. And I'm going to put the cherry blossoms away, and then I'm going to bring them out again next year. So if you've been watching some of our other videos, you see that I use faux flowers in both my stagings. If you go to Instagram and take a look, you're going to always see flowers are a huge part of our design. And so I'm going to show you today how to match now the faux flower with the vessel. Now, the other trick to making your faux look realistic is to add real branches. So if we take a look through here, these are actually real pussy willow branches. So they've been dried, the pussy willow is still on it, and I mix it with my cherry blossoms. Again, these pussy willows are in season, so I'm not going to be using these in the fall because then it's going to look, again, less realistic. Now, if you want to take it to the next level, I've done this for one client where we used real cherry blossom branches, and once the blossoms fell off, we actually we cut these faux cherry blossoms off and we glued them to the real branches, and that gave her the most realistic look. Not great for storing them, I will say that, but the client wanted something that was going to give her a long season for that season, and she was very happy with the result. So let's take a look at some more faux flowers. So I've taken out the cherry blossoms and I've now replaced them with these flowers. So the next tip is going to be in keeping with what we said about mixing in the branches that are in season, is about mixing your flowers. So the first thing that I'm going to suggest is, once again, you're going to mix your faux flowers with the same season flowers. So again, we're not going to mix sunflowers with cherry blossoms because they grow in two different seasons. You wouldn't find them together. My preference, and you'll see in most of my arrangements, is to do one type of flower. Now, I'm going to pull this out for a minute, and I'm going to put 3 stems here. Okay? So you can see for the size of the vessel that 3 flowers or stems aren't going to make an impact. So first of all, these are too short for the vessel. You want your flowers to be about 1.5 to 2 times in height as your vessel. So if your vessel's 12 inches, your flowers should be about 18 to 24 inches above the top of the vessel. Now, I'm going to show you why here I can get away with not hitting that height, but it doesn't always work. And one of the ways that I sometimes counter that is, if I really want to use the vessel, I just stuff the vessel at the bottom when it's not clear, and that way my flowers will get more height. So the most realistic, again, way is when you're using the same flower. You can see the minute I start using that branch in abundance, it completely changes the aspect of that. So if you're going to do it, go big or go home. Not just in height, but in volume. I think that's even more important. So if I replace these, I'm going to switch them out, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to first show you what it will look like with just a few. Now, in a different type of vessel, just a few would work. So let's take a look at one of the vases from our shop page. So this type of vessel, I'm going to use something light and airy and sculptural because the vase is very sculptural. So you can see if I were to put all of these in, it's not quite going to give me the look I'm after. but by putting only a few in here and angling the direction that I want it to go in, I only need a few branches because I'm making a sculptural statement rather than an abundance statement. But when I come back here, it's just not going to cut it. So again, you're going to see that when I layer in, I like to say a minimum of 9 to 12 stems. Now I start to get the show. And why this works is because, again, in nature, you're not going to see these growing one at a time. You're going to see them in abundance, which is part of the beauty of them. And you can see here, because I'm now layering, they're almost sitting on top of each other and actually creating the height that I was originally looking for. Now, I'm going to try to mix a flower with this, and I want to show you. This is a flower snowball bush that grows at the same time as these flowers. Now, if I add that, it kind of gets lost. So when you're mixing flowers, this is one thing you want to look at, is this is a very delicate flat petal. There's no contrast between the two, both in size as well as shape. So you're really just getting a jumble of flowers. Now, if I bring the snowball bush, which grows at the same time, and I'm going to break one of my rules, but we'll talk about that in a minute, and I add that, now you can see how that's making a statement. It's setting off the delicate petals that are flat by bringing in a contrasting flower, both in scale and shape. And so if I pull this snowball bush back up, this is why I broke one of the rules that I have created for myself. I never bend a stem for this reason. You can see it becomes a tangled mess. So when I first started working with faux flowers, I was scared to death of them. They're not cheap. And what if I cut them and I cut them the wrong height and it didn't want to wind up working in the vessel that I was thinking, and now it was ruined. So I didn't want to commit, and so I bent the stems, and the whole thing was so stressful and so messy. Here's what I've learned. Treat your faux flowers the way you would a real flower. So use a vessel for faux that you would use for real. So in other words, a tulip is very delicate. So you're not going to put that in a big chunky vase like this. You're going to put it in a vessel that is more delicate, lighter, maybe glass, silver, as we saw on my counter. You're not going to use something that's going to overwhelm the flower. When you're doing faux, you're going to do the same thing. You're not going to use a delicate vase for this now, or a small vase, because the size of the flower head would overwhelm something that's small. So we want to use something that's got bulk to it. Then don't be afraid to cut. So these are the only tools I think you need besides the vessels. One of them is a scissor to cut off the tags, and sometimes there is binding. The other is a good wire cutter. So when you're using your stems and they are too long, don't be afraid to snip it. Use the wire cutter and snip it. Now, having said that, never cut them all at the same height. In nature, you wouldn't see all the flowers growing at the same height. And in nature, you wouldn't put all the flowers, a good florist wouldn't anyways, at the same height. You're going to give it height and dimension. So that's what you want to create in your vessel. So let's take a look at some other of my favorite faux flowers. Here's another example, if you must mix flowers, where I've used not only a difference in the size and shape and structure of the petal, but you can see that I've brought in that little bit of pink in my main flower. So that's an important note. is that the color of your flowers should also match the color of your vessel, and then you want it to complement the flowers coming together. But I do not suggest you do more than 2, 3 different flowers at max to get the signature look that you see in all of our projects. So here's another example. I'm going to show you a couple more examples of mixing flowers. So here, this is a more contemporary type flower for me. So I would pick a more contemporary vessel to put it in. So you can see they come like this, and then we've got the bud with its leaves. So I'm going to start layering in my spiky with my smooth. Now, let me bring another one here so you can still see. We've got enough of the leaves, and I'm going to play around with those so that it's setting off my flowers. So if I try to bring this one in, you can see that's not going to work because it's a spiky with a spiky, and also that green is kind of going to get lost. Now, if I want to bring in a white, it works even though it's spiky because the color and the scale is smaller. But if I were doing this arrangement and I wanted to bring in a little bit of white, I'm going to go with that again so that we get now a soft petal with the spiky and the smooth. Or I could bring in, if I want to keep it all green, again, it's another texture, another shape. So in design, one of the most effective ways of bringing interest to a design is through contrast. Rough, smooth, matte, shiny, textured, smooth. So that's why that is going to work. Now I'm just going to show you if I bring in another flower here in a different color, you can see it doesn't really work. This flower already has so many colors, and while you think, yes, in nature all colors go together, it really depends on the look you want. This for me isn't going to be as luxurious as if I go back to my snowball bush. Okay, so the other thing that I could bring in here is a tulip. Again, so now I'm getting that contrast of color, but I'm bringing in a different dimension. So I'm getting a layered look, a dimensional look. So when choosing your vessels, you want to, for the most part, pair a contemporary vessel with a contemporary flower. Again, right now you see the bulrushes are very hot. I'm not necessarily going to want to mix it with a snowball because this is very old-fashioned, romantic, you think lushness. This is again more contemporary. So you can see I keep an abundance of these faux flowers. We are going to be putting up quite a few of these on the shop page for you to have a look at. One more thing when purchasing your faux flowers. So I want to pull this bundle as well as this bundle. So all the flowers that I've shown you so far are flowers that grow on a single stem or a multitude of flowers on a bunch. Again, that's another way to get a realistic look. Here is a store-bought bouquet. So you can see they're all coming off of one stem, and you have several different flowers all bunched together. And same with here, you've got the same flower, but they're growing off of one stem. Why do I have these? These are inexpensive ways to get a good low arrangement done. So this is where now you're going to use your clippers, and this type of a flower, I would rarely use it on its own in abundance. This is more a filler. You can see if I start adding these one at a time to my arrangement, it just brings again some texture and dimension. And these I would cut down and I would use them in a low vessel, either in a very low full arrangement. They're a little bit too big for a bedside table arrangement, so that's another thing. You want to scale your flower to your vessel, but these are used mainly, as I said, for arrangements that are going to be low, so not a vase, more like a planter, where I'm doing a lush low arrangement, so I fill in with these less expensive flowers. So let's go over here and talk a little bit about vessels. So here we have a few vessels, some from our shop page and some that are from MMI's inventory. So I just want to go through some of the things that I look for in a vase. These I loved for their texture. Now, not sure if I'm a fan of the shiny gold, but I never worry about the color when I'm buying these vases, because this is something that's so easily remedied with a can of spray paint, and I love that. I can either paint this black or white. It was really this ripple texture that I loved, and I loved the fact that it came in a set. And normally when I do sets, I don't necessarily put flowers in both, but sometimes I do. So it really just depends on, again, the mood, the house, the look I'm going for. So this is one that I really, again, loved the shape, but I hate the color. So this is definitely going to get spray painted. I just haven't decided if it's going to be a matte gold or in a black. Now this glass I just love because it's so sculptural. So I just want to quickly show you something. So if I were to put these flowers in there, you can see it's not complementing the vase at all. So when you have a lip that widens, so not a wide one, but one that flares out, that's telling you that the best flower for that vase is something that's going to have drape to it. So these are all bunched together. They're not really ready to use, and you can see they're too short for the vase. But do you see what I mean by drape? So I'm going to be able to follow the swell of that opening with my flowers, and I would take this so that it sort of comes out here like this. Now this, on the other hand, is a opening that gets narrower. So typically what I like is a more fluffy flower in something like this that's going to come and spill over the sides of this. Here we have a more contemporary vase. And again, you can see if I were to do something like this, how beautiful that looks, versus if I come back to something that's spiky and straight up. I could make that work if I add some softness with leaves, so that's not necessarily out. I do like the way the angular shape and texture of that complements the spiky, but I would probably again go with something a little bit fluffier here. This is one of my favorite vases. I love the volume at the bottom, and we've used it with very sculptural greens as opposed to flowers, something that is on a branch and just kind of can get feathered out. So if I start to put that in, you can see they're again too short, but now I can manipulate these and get a very winsome look going with the sculpture of that vase. And because this is glass, there are a couple of ways to really fake the look of these being real flowers. One of them is you can actually add water. I've done that many times. The only thing I caution is, just like with real flowers, you want to change that water so that it doesn't get stale, and that gives you a more realistic look. And then if I just want to hide the base of the stems, but I'm not really going for a real look, I like to buy these colored stones. These happen to be gold. You can request us to have these on our shop page, mycuratedinterior.com. They do come in colors, and so sometimes, again, in a more contemporary space, I will fill the bottom portion of that and have that color kind of filter up to the rest of what we're doing. And then these are new to the shop page. They'll be on in a few weeks. These colored vases, limited edition of these. Again, with the wider lip here, I would do something like a hydrangea, a peony, an old-fashioned rose in that. And then this, I would do probably a tulip, something again with drape. Same thing over here. Now these are great for bedside tables because they're small. I also like using these. We have them in different sizes, just as sculpture, and I'll mix black and white. This is on our shop page. I love her. So definitely love this with a greens only arrangement where it drapes. We've also done it with tulips, but as I said, my favorite is with greens so that it drapes and it looks like it's actually growing. And then this is a silver plated bud vase. So I have a few of these that I keep around the house. I love them, and I do put real flowers in them as well as faux. But I just want to show you. So these are tulips, but you can see that they're cut short. So if I just pull those up, you can see what a difference that would make if it had some leaves growing or looking like they spill over the edge, and that it had more of an abundance of flowers than it does here. I hope today's video helped ignite your passion for faux flowers. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and ring that bell icon to be notified of our future videos. And leave a comment. Let us know how you feel about faux flowers and what you'd like to see from future videos. Thanks for watching. I'm Miriam Manzo.